listeners. Welcome to season 3 podcast of Life is Better with You in It. And you guys are in for a real treat today because I'm getting interviewed on this podcast session. And so I bring with you one of my friends, Jessica, who I met last year at a writer's retreat with Bob Goff and Kim Stewart. And so, Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This is just such a pleasure to get to talk with you.
I think we're going to have a great conversation today about writing and about being something else and what it means to be something else and have this business and then have this book idea and the process behind it, because it does feel sometimes daunting. Sometimes you don't know when the finish line is, especially if you've never done this before. And I know that you and I, when we met, we had all these ideas about books and how we were going to get something into the world. And we have these great ideas, but then what? And so I think you and I have asked ourselves that question a lot right now, is like, then what? So maybe start with a little bit about you. Tell our listeners about you and maybe a little bit about your book idea and what you've been writing about.
Wonderful. Yes, my name is Jessica Jennings, and I'm a therapist. I've been in the field of feminine psychology and depth psychology for 20 years, and I love working with women. And my passion, I have a daughter, my passion is to really guide women into embodying wisdom and to learning how to live in truth and love in a way that is aligning with how we are meant to live, so that life becomes even more full of who we are as people, so we can show up in presence instead of showing up in our fear. And so the book is called Women Who Rule the World, because I want women to understand how to rule their inner world and how to do that through feminine psychology, through myths, through stories, and understanding your story so that you can move forward in embodying wisdom in your inner world. Because it's dark in there, right? It is dark in our inner world. Sometimes it feels so dark in that what we might consider that inner kingdom. But I believe we were meant to rise up into all that is real and really rule and reign in our own gifts and in our own true identity. And that's hard to find in this culture where everything seems fake and AI and focused on image, as opposed to what I want women to focus on, which is presence. Because in the book, I explore different myths and different stories, different fairy tales that help us understand how these images can really bring to life the message and the gentle shift back to, instead of fixing something, being present with it, instead of worrying about something, being loving and tender, compassionate, and curious about what is really going on here. Instead of what's wrong with me, I want people to ask the question, what happened here, right? What's going on here? And how can I meet myself in this place of fear so that I can shine the light of love, I can be in truth, and I can embody wisdom in a way that's going to change everything. And guess what? If everyone did that, this is my little soapbox, and I'll get off. If everyone did their work, if everyone shined the light within and did this work of rising up into the real truth of who they are, I believe presence is healing. It's even more deep and abiding than we can begin to imagine, but we can experience it. And so as we experience that abiding presence of others, but also of ourselves, as we choose to show up, if everyone shined their light in a circular image, right? If you hold up a light, it kind of casts a shadow within a circle. If everyone did that, then we would be living in a world that would truly be changed, because we would be present and we would be healing not only ourselves, but those around us in a way that wasn't full of our effort, that was full of our presence. And so that's what the book is really about. It's about ruling your inner world so that together in wisdom, we can rule the world in a totally different way. We can usher in a kingdom of love and truth and wisdom.
I love it. I think that's awesome. An awesome message for women and listeners who are, either parenting young women and rising them up in a world that is full of social media, because we've never experienced this before of how to handle it. And so you've been writing this book. We met last year, on this journey to have a book. And so when you're something else, you're going to try something new. That's what I'm learning about me. And a little plug of the book came today.
I'm so excited for you. Look at that. It's beautiful.
Thank you. It's got, obviously it says not for resale, but it's cool to at least have it in my hand so I can look at it. And it takes so much work to get to that point. And so I think that's where we're going to flip the script on this interview. And so I want you to ask me some questions that you have about the book writing process, what I know so far. I don't know everything, and I'm just figuring it out as I continue to kick this can down the road. So tell us maybe where you're at in your process and then tell me your question.
Yes. So my basic manuscript is written. I've had one editing round with an editor, and now it's back on my desk. And so I am really in the process of re-entering and doing the step-by-step, one suggestion at a time editing. And it's hard for me because I am a big picture creative thinker. And so one of my questions for you is, how do you jump back in and really focus on the minutia when sometimes your brain wants to just kind of ping pong around to everything and not be able to make any progress at all? That's one of the struggles that I'm having as an ADHD slash creative thinker that likes to think big picture. It's hard to kind of get back into the nitty gritty details of each page or each sentence.
So you did a developmental editor, right? So that's the first,
Yes.
okay. And so, well, for listeners,
Yep.
we didn't know this, but essentially what a developmental editor is someone who doesn't look through and like fix every misspelling. They look at what you're saying and how you're saying it. So they'll look at kind of like, they'll read the whole chapter. My understanding of what they've done is that they'll read the whole chapter. They'll look at what the point of the chapter is, how you've laid it out, and how you've been clear. I think when I was going through the process of having a developmental editor, which I thought was the last step, turns out it's not, that they would fix all like misspellings, they would fix context things that I wasn't like really sure about. But really, like what it was like, hey, you weren't clear here in what you said. So what did you mean by what you said? And so what I did in terms of like how I jumped back into the process of the book was I set aside specific time and I set a deadline for myself. So I got the edits back and I thought I was going to have a book published in like August, and now we're mid-September and it's probably not going to come till October. And so I set a deadline and I said, okay, I'm going to do one chapter a day, or I think I did one chapter. No, I did one chapter a week. And so I went through each chapter and just fixed it small edits at a time. I did wake up early. So I woke up before everyone woke up because I knew that as soon as I got to working in my business and doing the phone interviews and doing the consulting calls and doing the meetings that were all important, and then doing the after school stuff of the lacrosse practice, and then having some me time too, like so I could be by myself, it was never going to get done. It was just never going to get done. I also spent some Saturday mornings at the library. So our library here, our local library, you can book a room for free for 2 hours. And so I would try to do as much as I could for 2 hours. So I would leave here with my laptop, get my glasses, and then I would treat myself to like a Starbucks afterwards. Because when you get those developmental edits back, it's like, you weren't clear about what you said in this section. And so like, what did you mean? Like even got to a point where like I was talking about someone in the book about how they said something really nice about me. And then I was like, oh my God, I don't remember what they said. What was I writing about? So like you have to think. And then I would like text my husband and be like, I said this in the book. Do you remember what this was? And so it was like honestly, like painstakingly handling one edit at a time. And then once one got done, I was like, cool. But I did set an end date for myself so that way I knew when it was going to be done, because otherwise it wasn't going to happen. So I did also have one chapter. I totally had to rewrite the whole thing. It was awful because I looked at the chapter and I read it over and I was like, he's right. And then like I gave it to my husband. So I think you should find somebody, listeners, if you're listening to this and you're in this writing process, find somebody that you can trust who can read your words, who knows you. For me, that worked. Bill knows me very well, and it's my husband. And so I was able to give him the chapter and I'm like, is this person right about what they're saying? And he's like, yeah, they're so right. And I was like, what do you think I was trying to say? And he's like, you were either trying to say this or this. And I'm like, I was trying to say this. And then so I had to spend a weekend reviewing the entire chapter, rewriting the whole thing to have sentences that matched the steps that I was trying to go through.
Absolutely. And I think there's so much power in listening to that feedback and really hearing from people who love you and know you. And then to be able to say, I can offer this up humbly to recognize I know what you have to say, Jenn, is powerful and important,
Mhm.
but how we're going about saying it is just as important because people aren't going to get it. If you
Yes.
confuse, you lose, right? So it's like, how do
Yes.
we continue to dig down and say and go back past our own ego to say, you're right, this just, I wanted to say this, I didn't say it clearly. How can I say it in a better way? And that does take a lot of thought. It takes a lot of thought. And so um, that follow-up question would be, how long then did you give yourself as far as that deadline when you look back? Because I know everybody has a different book chapter number and things like that, but
Yep.
how long did it take? You said a week a chapter, really, especially having a little extra time to write the chapter you had to rewrite, of course.
So like if I look back to when our guy sent his stuff to me, and I thought it was awesome too. So I think you should find a developmental editor that does what our guy does, because we both use the same developmental
Mhm.
editor. That he goes through and does all the edits, but then gives you like that piece of paper where it explains everything that's happening. I think that's such a good layout because
Yes.
especially if you've never done it before, like you don't even know what to do first with the information. Because I've been a recruiter for 8 years, and when he was like, "I'm a developmental editor," and I was like, "That's a job title? Like, what does that
That's a thing.
what's that even mean, right?" And I thought it was the same thing as like a content writer or an editor. Like I feel like it's all the
Mm,
same thing, and I felt like they all focus on the same thing. And so the deadline I think I gave myself, I think was like a month. I think I tried to get it done in 30 days. So
that's
like
awesome.
I got it back June 7th. I told myself July 15th.
Okay.
So what, five,
Oh,
6 weeks to
yep.
get it finished.
Yep.
And then also too, like I would ask him like questions. So, and I like did say like, "Hey, am I okay to follow up when I have questions or if I don't understand what you meant or something like that?" So I would follow up with questions or say, "Hey, listen, I did this," or "Hey, I totally missed this part. Can you tell me like what you meant?" So I gave myself about 6 weeks to finish it. I didn't love any part of that process. I felt like some of the times, like I was like, "Well, you kind of just get what I mean, right?" And
Yeah.
no, because you think like the person in your chair, right? When Bob says we have to think about the person in our chair, if he was the person in my chair and he doesn't know what I meant, nobody else is gonna get it. So
Absolutely.
I think it helped put a different lens on it, which I think is crucial when you are writing a book.
Absolutely. Because that's going to make your work so much stronger.
Yep.
And it helps us all to say, this is what I was trying to say. And there is even a better way to be able to be clear and concise and, creative in how we present it so people will get it so that they can open up their minds, their hearts even further in this area. And
Yep.
so my follow-up question to that is then what is next? Once you feel, okay, my developmental edits are in the bag, I've got those, my direction is clear and my words are clear, then what do you do? So you have your deadline,
Yep.
you meet your deadline, and then what?
Yep. Then the next step of the process that I did was I found a content editor. And so a content editor is, I think, kind of like a proofreader, but not from what I'm understanding. There could
Hmm.
be two steps to this. And so I found a content editor, someone who could read through the book, make sure everything was placed right. Any grammatical errors, anything that sounded out of place, anything like where commas should go or where they shouldn't go. Because in my first round of edits and then in the second round, I realized that I said "really" 94 times in the book. So I must really like
Like
uh
really, like really.
apparently, and I was like, I
Yeah.
guess, like I was trying to put some emphasis behind it. What I learned, and listeners too, like this may be something for you to consider when you start writing really, is that when you remove really, I actually felt like the word was stronger. So whatever I was trying to emphasize felt stronger without having the really. And so I think I thought I was going to lose value in that and removing all of those. I didn't remove all of them. I think I got down to like 24 by the end of it.
Good for you.
I'll have to look back and see where I landed. But then I found a content editor. And so I did look around Upwork, but I was able to get a referral, and I'll share with you like who I referred. But I think you can find a content editor on Upwork as well. I'm sure you can find them on like some of these other like writing Fiverr websites and stuff. But basically what the content editor is going to do, they might spend, depending on how many chapters you have, how many chapters do you have in your book?
I have 8.
8. Okay, so mine got up to I think 19, and then I had like a bonus chapter at the end. The bonus chapter came just out of the blue, and I wrote it really fast. I don't know why it came,
That's
but it came.
great.
Yeah, it was crazy. And so she did the 20 chapters, and then it took about 15 to 20 hours. So, typically like if you're working with someone, just know that it's probably going to push your deadline by like 3 weeks. So I would budget 3 to 4 weeks for a content editor. And then the last step, which I'm thinking you might be asking this part next, is what happens after that. So what happens after that is you get it back. They sent a clean version of it so I could read it clean. And then they sent the edited version so I could read like things that they removed, words that they changed. There were some words that I was like, I would never use this word naturally. So I put my word back because I wanted me to be in the book and not feel like it was like so changed.
Absolutely. You don't want to be edited out of your own book.
Correct.
So
And
you want to
that's
make certain you have your voice, right?
yes.
That keeps shining through, and you can do that. You have every right to say, nope, I want this back in, and this is part of me.
Yes.
And they're helping you though hone it down and clarify and continue to say, yeah, you use that word way too much. And then you can still keep it for a lot of things, or that word isn't natural for me. So I love that. I think that's really powerful to remember that these people are great at what they do, but what they're doing is suggesting, and
Absolutely.
you can veto it if you feel like, no, this is what I really want. This is what is genuine and authentic to you. So that's great.
And when you're something else, listeners, right? We talk about of the chat of the season is being something else. When you're something else, you do have the power to put your voice back into some things. And so some of the words I felt like I would never use that word, or like that doesn't sound like something I would say. And so I would think about it, and then I would give it some time and then go back and change it if I felt super strongly about it. Because some things like, you don't want to nitpick over every word and then change it back, because then what was the point of a content editor? But there were some things that just felt smoother the way that I said it, because I was like, if I pictured this book, right? So if I think about this book should be a version of me sitting and having coffee or a glass of wine with someone, depending on the hour, and being like having that back and forth conversation experience. I wanted them to experience like the real version of me, like being able to like hear my words, or like some of the phrases that I would say, like in my house, I'm infamous for being like 20 million. Yeah, there's 20 million toys around. I need to pick them out. Or there's 20 million dishes. Can you put them away? And so like 20 million, like even like, it's like funny now. Everybody in my house laughs about like the phrase 20 million.
Yes.
And so some of the things that I kept. And so after the content editor, then the last and final stage, which feels like it takes forever, is like a proofreader. Oh no, the last and final stage of the writing is the proofreader. So the proofreader will go back in and just redline anything that looks out of place, fix anything. Like there were some times where like a heading of a chapter, or like a heading of like the beginning of a new paragraph didn't look right. So they would fix it, they would bold it, or they would be like, hey, this doesn't match. Like at one point I realized that one of my chapter headings in the book did not match the chapter heading at the front, which is weird because you would not think that that would happen, right? You would think that you would be paying attention to it. But
I hear you.
If you're listening to this now, just know that you're going to look at this book so much, you're not going to see any edits. You're not going to see anything. You just don't.
Absolutely.
But you don't. Oh, I totally forgot something important to share with you too. So what I did After I finished all the developmental edits, I asked people to be beta testers. And so I like reached out to a bunch of people who I thought might be interested. I posted on my personal Facebook page, hey, I'm looking for people who want to read this book and give some feedback on it. And so I set up a Google sheet and like a Google form that they could submit their information to and then fix their edits. What I learned about that process is that not everyone can be the beta tester, right? Because you can only have so many voices speaking into it. I think I had like 14 or 15, and then by the time all the edits were finished, I think I had like probably 5 to 6 who had submitted like actual things where it's like, hey, this word's wrong. Hey, you meant to keep out your kids' names, but you listed his name on this page. Things that I would just never imagine to find. So I think like
Yes.
if I were to impart this on anyone, I would say make sure that you do find, I think I got lucky in this, but I found people who gave me like grammar and edit fixes, and then people who were like, did you think about this paragraph and like how you wanted to communicate that to parents? And I was like, oh, I didn't think that someone would take it that way, but here's what I really meant. And I'm
Yes.
like, there I go. There I
And
go.
that's really helpful because it keeps you from communicating a double message, one that you want to communicate, one that you don't. You can say, let me clarify. And that's
Yes.
great to have different people thinking on those lines because their brain's working differently than yours and their brain hasn't seen it 72 times, right? Before this moment. And so they can come in with fresh eyes and that makes so much sense.
Yes.
That's
It's
so
wild. My book
extremely
feels
helpful.
changed from the beta testers who read the book and edited it because they
Yeah.
were able to provide that thought and that perspective. So then when it did go to the content editor, it was
Mhm.
like more perfect than it could have been with just me in it. And I did
Yes.
put a deadline on it for them too. I gave them all a month to read it and submit feedback. We might have to download off the off show about how to get that feedback, because what I did try was a Google form, but when you
Mhm.
submit the Google form, or if they're still typing and they don't submit, none of the information will save. So there's
Oh,
that. And then
yeah.
there's also, you know, busy parents, right? Aren't we all busy? Or busy moms who
Yeah.
were like,
Yeah.
they would screenshot things to me. And so they were like, do you want me to send a bulk info to you? I'm like, however you want it, you can like send it to me by pigeon or by owl. Like, I don't care. However you send it, I am humble enough to like receive the
Yeah.
information and like
Yeah.
just give me the content and I will fix it. So maybe I should have had a more uniform way to receive all the information, because I think that took more time too, trying to like,
Makes sense.
okay, I got 3 emails from this person, and then I need to go back and look at the Google form. So I would
Mhm.
probably tell myself, like, figure out a better way to like put information in
Mhm.
one place. So I only had to look one place for it.
It's a
Um,
great point.
and I
Mhm.
did it as soon as it came in. Otherwise, as
Yes.
you know, listeners, life can
Yes.
happen. And like, instead of life happening to me, I want to happen at my life. And so I had to plan out time like, okay, tomorrow you're going to go over Jane's information to you. And the next day you're going to go over this person's like information to you. And then one person sent me the whole book edited. And so I had to go to work, like, you know, had to go to
Mhm.
work, went to the
Mhm.
library on a Saturday morning for 2 hours and cranked out all of the information, because it was
Yeah.
a lot to like take in. And I don't know about you, but like for me to edit the book, I have to do it in quiet, because otherwise, if I'm here in my office
Absolutely.
and everyone's home, it's mom, can I have a snack? And I'm like, your dad's in there. No, you walked in. And I love that you walked in. Oh, wait, let me check Facebook real
Yeah.
quick. Or like,
Yeah.
oh, let me go on Instagram. And so like when I went to the
Mhm.
library, it was me taking myself out of this office that I love to be like, this, it's so quiet in here. I could hear
Yes.
a pin drop and now I can focus. And I would feel so great going into Sunday, knowing that it was like one more step was done.
Oh, so proud of you. That's
And
fantastic.
if you need a beta tester, I'll be one of yours.
Oh, you're so kind. And that's one of the things I have thought about too is do I send one chapter to 8 friends? Right, because I have 8 chapters. So one chapter and ask 8 friends just very specifically. And I was thinking about having them edit it in the Word docs so that they could highlight something that doesn't make sense and make a comment to me. So they're kind of, doing an editing process just like the developmental editor did, but just on a more like friendly scale where they're just
Yes,
like, this doesn't make sense to me, or this is fabulous, I love this, or what did you mean by that, or this is spelled wrong. So I think those things can be helpful. And it's interesting to see, are there people willing to read the whole thing? Are there people willing to read a
there are.
chapter? So I think that that's really powerful because you do want people to be able to give you feedback from the layperson's perspective, from the person who's going to be sitting there reading it. And
Yeah.
that'll be such a gift
I
and
think
such a
too,
step forward.
you may want to consider too, Jessica, being able to send the whole 8 chapters to people to see if they'd be willing to
Mhm.
read all the 8 chapters, because they'll be able to understand the entire book, not just one chapter.
Yeah,
I don't know
that's
if
a
one
great point.
chapter is enough to get like the point of like what you're trying to like drill home in the book. So you may want to consider that.
That's a good consideration too. So it's good to, so I was curious as to that because I think for me, my hesitation is I don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed, but I think some people are, I've been already had one person say, I want to do this for you. I'm
Yes,
very interested in what you're writing. And so it's exciting to challenge some of my thoughts that, oh, people are busy and won't want to do this versus let's just be bold and courageous like you're doing and just ask. And people can say no, right? If they need to say no
absolutely.
during this season, then it's just, enough people that you can ask another person.
Yep.
So
And I got brave and I just decided, I was like, you know what, just like make the ask on social and like see
yep.
who may be
See
interested
who
in it. And I was super surprised at the people who responded. Like some were friends and family, right? And then other people like I haven't been close with in a while, but like they were in my like my life for like a certain season.
yeah.
And just having the perspective of like older friends and more recent friends and then family members, I was like, this is like a cool mix of people who are giving stuff. And one thing I'll share too is at the end, like what I decided to do, because I felt too like you, like do people have time? Will they feel a certain way if I like ask them because they're not getting paid for it?
Yeah.
So the people that like I did get all the feedback from, and then like people who had signed up to be beta testers, the entire group, I sent them a coffee cup. So if they gave me their address, I sent them a coffee cup and it says like you're something else on it. And then I did like a handwritten note because I wanted
Oh,
to be like, thank you for your time and like intention, because like it did really mean the world to me to like have their
absolutely.
info.
And to follow up with that gratitude and also just that cool reminder of your book. I love it. That's
Yes.
such a
Yes.
great thought. I
And
love
then
that.
too, when they gave me feedback about things that resonated, it was like,
Mhm.
like you know how like Bob always talks about like the breaching whale, where they're like, and
Yes,
you know you've got the audience's attention. There were a couple
absolutely.
of things that continued to come up where I was like, that's gonna affect a lot of people. That's really good to hear. And then also when they gave me quotes about their impressions of the book, when I was just like, hey, just tell me what you think about the book. Tell me like if you would buy it, whatever. I've used that information as quotes for the book. So like I've
Yes.
said, like beta testers have said that this book is blah, 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 because I feel like it's good
Mhm.
advertising and it's from people who
Agreed.
actually read the book. So I got like almost kind of like free testimonials out of it.
I love that. Yes. And so, any specific fears that you feel like you have faced in this final phase? Because starting to write the book, there's certain fears, but in this final phase of having others read it or having others give feedback or even getting the book back and having it in your hands, like any specific fears, plural or individual that you feel like you faced and really had to conquer in order to take these important steps.
Yeah, first fear is that just my mom and dad are going to buy the book. So there's that. Because you know, you want to see like, is this going to impact anyone? And I'm not
Yes.
asking anyone just to buy a sweatshirt. I'm saying like, I think you should buy this book because it's going to be an interactive journey. And so, because when you're something else, you got to put yourself out there. And so I'm just working past that fear and taking each step to get it to publish and to get it to release, just to see what happens out there in the world. Another fear I have is actually what happened to me is I wrote 19 chapters and one chapter was lost. So I got the edits back and then I went to send it to the beta testers the first time and I'm like, where's that chapter that talks about this specific topic? and it's an uncomfortable topic, and I didn't love writing about it, but like when I was doing the writing coaching, they were like, you have to have that chapter. It's got to stay. And I was like, here's this chapter. I found it. I never put it in the manuscript to the
Oh
developmental
my goodness.
editor. I had to
Yeah.
email him and be like, oh my gosh, I forgot this chapter. And then I was like, maybe I shouldn't put this chapter in.
Yeah.
But then I did. And I'm so glad that I did. I'm so glad that I remembered it because it was a chapter that's going to be important. It is important to the journey.
Mhm.
But as soon as I hit send to the 15 beta testers, I thought I might puke. And then I opened up the PDF because I was like, let me just like look back at what I sent them. Right now, I've looked at this document 20 million times.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But I'm like, what did I send them? Found 2 spelling errors in the first part, and I was like, nope, nope,
Nope. Nope. You're like, no, you're like, gotta let it go.
I did.
Let it
I was like,
go.
just shut the laptop. This is
Ah.
what this process is for. Just shut it. Don't
Yep.
think about it. And then I just like, I feel like my face like kind of went white because you're putting your whole thing about your life out there. And then you're like, did I ask so and so for their permission to use their name? Did I ask so and so for their permission to share this story? How's this going to come across when someone else reads it? And so then I like went into a little bit of a thought spiral, but I was like, no, this is the point. This is the point that someone's going to read this and stop anything, protect me from myself when they read something that may be like out of character or like, hey, I think you didn't mean to say this the way that you thought. So
Yeah.
those were my fears. The fear of like really putting yourself out there of
Mhm.
like, this is me. I am something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's gonna be a lot. There's gonna be some like F words in there, and there's also words about Jesus in there. So
Yeah.
there's got to be somebody out there who's like me, who
Yeah.
swears a little bit and loves Jesus. And what do we think about that too?
Yes. Yes. And just being humble like that is there's a fear element because there is judgment in our world, but you're rising up to say that's not what I am going to live by, right? I'm going to release that fear. There's so many more people who absolutely relate and need this book. They need to understand themselves and to feel that community within this group of people who are something else, and they need to know that this is a beautiful and good thing. And you putting yourself out there is exactly what we need. That is the healing presence, right? That is needed so much in our culture. It is pulling back the facade and saying there is something deep and abiding and accepting in what you've done and the work that you've done. And so it is so worth it. I am doing the same thing and facing my fears, so many similar fears to what you've mentioned. So I appreciate you just sharing that part, because it does represent the book that you're bringing into this world. And it is such a beautiful, but just often arduous process that doesn't come without tremendous courage. And like you're doing, just facing your fears and knowing that what you're bringing forth is so worth all of that,
Yep.
because it's going to show people a light and bring people into a community of love and acceptance so they can continue to grow in their uniqueness, right? There's something else.
There's something else.
And they're going to relate to, all of this, because I related so much to just even the short snippet of the back cover. I was like, oh my goodness, so many things just jumped out at me. And it was the breaching whale moment for me too, just in reading the back cover. So I'm so grateful for you and for your courage and your willingness to share with me today. This helps me so much to continue this journey. And so I'm just grateful for your time to answer these questions.
Love it. Well, listeners, you heard it here first. So this is a process. A process is not as quick as an easy bake oven, but more like a sourdough that takes a few days. But really, it's a few months. Sometimes it's a few years to get it out there. But we will encourage you today to keep writing. And don't let fears get in the way of sharing your stories. So listeners, I hope you've learned something today, kind of in this back and forth question process. And we'll chat with you soon. Let's get that book out if you've got it.